show.
Yeah, there's like it's it's blurry, and they say the title and all that stuff. So yeah. So hi, welcome to Through the Stained Glass: Conversations on Media and Culture through a Christian Lens. Today we are talking about the new Beauty and the Beast.
My dear Belle, you're so ahead of your time. This is a small village.
You are the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. Nobody deserves you.
And it's small-minded as well. But small also means safe.
Which is a remake of the beloved Disney animated film, which when it was released in 1991, became an instant classic and the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture. The star-studded cast includes Emma Watson, Dan Stevens, Ian McKellen, and Elle McGregor. A recent interview with director Bill Condon ignited, predictably, a firestorm of controversy when he announced that the film would feature an exclusively gay moment involving the film's antagonistic sidekick LeFou. So before we get, I guess, to the controversy, I wanted to introduce our guests. So this is Austin Anderson, who is our post-production manager at City on a Hill, and Amy Simpson, who is our publishing coordinator. So welcome to the show today, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So yeah, like I said, before we get to the controversy, I guess we want to talk about the production itself, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Beauty and the Beast, from a movie perspective, I was very impressed. It's from a production standpoint, production design, it's a really beautiful film. They did a great job, with just costume design, set design, the music is really great. I'm not a huge fan of musicals myself personally, so for me, I thought just overall the story, it all kind of takes place in just two areas with a lot of music, and I find it to be a little boring probably just from my guy action movie perspective, but
yeah, I was actually taken aback a bit because I didn't read up a lot on it, and having seen the other live action remakes, which were able to depart from the source material a little more, I was actually kind of taken aback of like, oh wait, we're singing the exact songs? Like, a lot of the songs, or almost all of the songs from the original one are in this one. Sorry, I think you were about to say something.
No, I agree. I mean, I was 7 when the original one came out, and as a girl who loved Disney movies, I enjoyed the live action remake just because it was exactly what I had watched before, and I remembered it. I wished that I was watching it at home though, and I could sing along with the songs instead of being in the theater with people. So
yeah, and I guess I can safely say there will be no spoilers because it is practically a shot-for-shot remake of the original film. They did add some material, I think, to try to develop characters and expand on backstory, which we'll probably mention some of that as we go. But for the most part, it is by far the most faithful rendition of the original film that we've seen so far in this string of live-action remakes. So any other final thoughts on the production itself before we segue into the controversy, which may be the very reason people tuned in?
Yeah, people are just waiting, I think, right now. We don't care about the movie. Let's just move on to the controversy.
No one's slick as Gaston, no one's quick as Gaston, no one's next as incredibly thick as Gaston. There's no man in town half as manly.
Perfect, a pure paragon.
You can ask any Tom, Dick, or Stanley, and they'll tell you whose team they prefer to be on.
The interesting thing about this for me is that when we decided we were going to do this show, I got a list, of films we were going to be covering throughout the year. This movie was on it before the controversy erupted. And because of that, I was thinking, I had my wife on the first show, and I thought it might be, no offense, please don't feel like second string here, but, we had talked about it being a good idea to have my 12-year-old daughter on the show to talk about Beauty and the Beast because, it is, I think a lot of story elements would appeal to a younger female audience.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but now I can't have her on the show, and not because she's not aware of the issue, and I told her she's allowed to see the film. But now there's this polarizing controversy brought into the film, or at least brought into the public consciousness by the comments of the director of the film, to where I basically had to explain to her, look, you're allowed to see the film, but we're going to be talking about this. People will inevitably not like what one of us has to say, and I just want to spare you the vitriolic comments that we're likely to get.
Right,
I
yeah.
don't want her online talking about this.
Yeah, right. And I say going into this movie too, I kind of read that controversy, had it in my mind, and for me going into to watch it, it was really hard to just kind of remove that and just watch it for the film that it is. Because this whole time I'm like, okay, like what are they trying to tell me here? What's the agenda they're trying to push on me? Or, and I've tried to just strip that away and just watch it as like, okay, if I didn't know anything about all this controversy and I just went and watched this movie, would I feel that they're trying to push something further than just this guy who looks up to, what's his name? The villain? Gaston. And so that was difficult, but I think coming out of it, I feel like it's just a lot of hoopla over something that just wasn't, it didn't need the controversy that it had. It didn't need this big blowout. It really was kind of nothing.
Yeah, no, I really agree. It was very subtle, and I wouldn't have noticed much of anything if I wasn't aware of the controversy before going in to watch the movie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I say like, if this was Disney's big push for, this LGBT agenda, I think they did kind of a poor job. Because the character himself doesn't have a lot of depth. He doesn't have any real problem that we're seeing. He doesn't have a past. He just looks up to Gaston and he's flamboyant about it. And his arc is kind of you're maybe bi-curious or something at the beginning, and then
Right.
at the very end, Disney kind of made it known that okay, he is a gay character. But that's kind of his arc. He's like, okay, he's
So subtle.
he might be gay, now he's gay. And there's no other backstory behind it. You don't know anything else about him, really.
Mm-hmm. And I saw some reviewers who described that moment at the end, the exclusively gay moment, as Bill Condon called it. A couple of reviewers referred to it as blink and you'll miss it, which I thought was pretty true. And it was like there was like an abrupt edit in it. Like it is the most awkward edit in the film to me.
It was.
The way it just kind of cuts away real fast. So I thought you were going to say something. I hope I didn't cut you off.
Well, no, and maybe we should clarify too that it's just because I heard a lot of hype of like, oh, it's two men kissing or anything like that. It's really just two men that are dancing in a ballroom style dancing.
Right,
with
they
each
end
other.
up partnered together briefly.
Exactly. They end up partnered together. It's not as though it's
Yeah.
like this really intimate dance.
Yeah, with as much
Yeah.
controversy around it, I was expecting to see like a full-on musical number. Like I was like, okay, because they're in this bar, this pub scene most of the time. I was like, okay, there's gonna be a musical number where he like comes out and he gets on top of the table and does like a little jig and dances and sings, and he's
Right.
like, I'm coming out of the closet kind of thing. And no, what happened is just a very blink and you miss it provider.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really subtle. And the other thing, the other moment I think people have mentioned is when there's a big climactic battle where the villagers charge the castle, the armoire, the dresser ends up, she attacks three guys by basically dressing them like Marie Antoinette style. Two of them run off screaming, and then one kind of looks back at her and smiles, and then kind of like walks away happy. And so again, that brought back to what you said, which was like, if this was the way you're pushing like a LGBT advocacy of some kind, I just felt like it was like, it just felt like mixed messaging there, because a lot of it was played for laughs.
Even with the wardrobe attack, I was talking to my wife about it because she's a big fan of Beauty and the Beast, and it might be her favorite Disney movie. And she says that actually happens in the animated film, that the wardrobe attacks, and one of them like is kind of like, ooh, I like it. And it's like a funny, it's like a funny little scene.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a big difference that I see here too between live action and animation. I think you can get away with a lot of that stuff in animation and it comes off humorous because characters in animations are bouncy and their personality comes out more within their flamboyant movements and things. So when you do a live action, it just sets everything so much more in reality that you're expected to take things seriously when when actually it is just humorous. It's just funny.
I feel like the whole conversation has been sadly wildly blown out of proportion.
Agreed.
I feel like I hope that there's a time in which something like this isn't even a story.
Thank you.
And to me, there are far more controversial things in the movie, like the fact that, in my opinion, my horse hates fat people and
Yes.
threw me off of him every opportunity he got.
I agree.
And like that, to me, was the most discriminatory thing that happened on the set, and I am pressing charges against the horse.
You know, I did theater in high school and in college, and because of that, we would see the productions of other high schools and colleges. So I've seen, and all my brothers did theater as well. So like I've seen countless high school productions, and it reminded me of when you see these high school productions, and some kid like decides that for whatever reason, he's going to play this character with decades of or centuries of production history, because it's like an old play that they're doing. He's going to play it gay, right? He's going to play it like as homosexual or whatever. And it's kind of played for laughs. And it just seemed real juvenile to me. Like the whole thing seemed real like when a high school kid plays a character gay to get laughs. And then if you find it objectionable in any way, you're the stick in the mud. And you're like, no, it's not that I'm, puritanical. It's that you look ridiculous because it's just such a juvenile, it's just such, I don't know, it just the whole thing struck me as very juvenile.
Yeah, I mean, his character is essentially the same, but I think that there's possibly some subtleties that were written in, just so maybe the director, if he felt like an LGBT kid was watching it, they felt like, oh man, he included me in this movie, like I have found my place in this. But at the same time,
that may have been their hope, but
yeah, that's their hope. But at the same time, like I don't think anybody who was gay would watch it and think like, oh man, they've really included me in this movie, know? I'm excited that this is the character that they've chosen to portray.
Like Gaston, hearts like Gaston. It's much more than the sum of his parts like Gaston. As a specimen, yes, an intimidating.
I actually thought there were a number of things that suddenly became awkward when we transferred to live action. Like I actually thought the dance between Belle and the Beast was awkward when it was a live action beast animal kind of thing. Like just some of the moves and just it
Well, how tiny Emma Watson is.
Right.
She's dancing with a buffalo.
Yeah, but I felt like that wasn't the only awkward dance going on. I thought there was another metaphorical awkward dance between, I guess, the feminist buzz around the movie, plus it's this obvious princess fantasy. There was a lot of lead-in buzz that because of Emma Watson's influence, there was going to be this kind of, I guess, more feminist manifestation of Belle. And so, I guess we thought we'd segue into talking about that a little bit and, ways y'all discern that manifesting itself in the story.
Right. And I mean, you still, like it stayed, like we talked about before, it stayed so true to the story. And so you see Belle in the beginning of the movie, and her love for books, and she picks up a book and she's like, oh, this is my favorite part, this is where the girl meets Prince Charming. So to me, kind of knowing a little bit about how maybe Beauty and the Beast is a little bit more feminist or progressive, or they're going to make it that way as compared to other Disney movies where the princess just kind of sits and waits for her Prince Charming. I found that her character was still not this, I can do everything a man can do and more, and I don't need any men in my life to make it complete. She still was Belle.
There's a great relevance in Belle and the treatment of Belle as a Disney heroine. Somebody who is not so interested in finding the prince. More interested in developing herself and reading and figuring out what's going on in the world,
I think it is important to define, like, when we say feminism, what we're talking about, this bigger ideology of I can do things without men, I don't need them, and sometimes women are greater than men. It's kind of flipping that.
Yeah, I would say, if there was any sort of feminist push within this movie, I mean, for the most part, like, I agree with it, like, this woman who, she's she wants to be a career woman. She wants to, move to the big city, start
She
life
wants
on
to be
her own.
different than
She's
the
different. She's
ladies who are pining away
intellectual.
for Gaston, you know?
Right, like she doesn't
Yeah.
settle for just the guys who think that women can't read. Like, okay, that's great. Like, yeah, you shouldn't settle down with a man who thinks that you shouldn't be able to read. I agree with that.
Yes.
So, so I actually like, she's, some parts of it might have been a little immature. The fact that maybe she's just going to run away from all her problems instead of, she could stay in the town and teach all the kids how to read and, be this great leader in her hometown. And then, but a lot of that is, she has like a messy past and, she lost her mother at a young age and then she, you see her grow and then learn to love somebody who happens to be a beast out of all people. And then she ends up, getting, I guess at the end, the big ballroom dance was her getting married to the beast. And then, we can maybe assume that she even just stays in her hometown at the end. So, I don't see the feminist push in anywhere really, and if there is one, then for the most part, I think it was a good thing.
Well, I read in an interview where, and this may sound like a cynical way of saying it, but like feminist advocacy has become part of Emma Watson's branding. Like she spoke at the UN.
Right.
She defined feminism as belief in the social and political equality of the sexes, which is a completely unobjectionable concept, an unobjectionable definition. But I also think it's a reductionist definition. Like it's a definition of a very complex, comprehensive ideology distilled down into something so simple it's deceptive. Because I think there's a whole worldview behind what constitutes equality and how that's attained. But one of the things I read is an interview that she had said, it's great that Belle reads books, that's in the original. It'd be great if she's an inventor as well, just like her father. And something we were saying before the show, which I thought was kind of interesting, is one of her inventions is a laundry machine. So there was just some kind of weird mixed messaging on some of this.
I mean, it goes back to what you said about how there's a weird dance going on where they're trying to push something that the story is not really allowing that to happen.
Right.
It really was the first modern Disney heroine, Disney princess, who doesn't want to be a princess, who doesn't really care about finding the prince. Someone who's more interested in books and seeing the world and kind of figuring out who she is than in finding a guy and getting married. She happens to do those things by the end, but it's not because that's her main interest,
For the most part, like the feminism in the story manifests itself in completely unobjectable ways. Like, invent things. That's awesome. Read.
I have a daughter now, and one thing I want her to grow up and know is that you don't just need to be like a pretty face and be some arm candy for some guy later on in life. Like I want her to read, and if she wants to make the step to start her career, start her own business, I want to give her the power to do that.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say that the film where it manifested that in a way that did kind of make me just go, ugh, and it wasn't because I object to the principle or practice of what was being depicted. It was just really bad history, and more than that, I felt like it was almost like what I would say is slanderous history. And it's the scene where Belle is teaching the girl to read, and there's a couple of villagers who are like, "Are you teaching a girl to read? Isn't it bad enough that we have one girl in this village who can read?" And I was like, man, this is not Afghanistan. And someone might dismiss this as what's the big deal, Richie? It's a fairy tale. But what was interesting to me is there's a scene in the film where in the background, but still prominently visible, is a giant crucifix. And then later, the Beast and Belle talk about their shared appreciation of Shakespeare. So there is this kind of grounding, however tenuous, to actual history. And so what kind of bothered me about that scene is my wife was recently reading to our children letters written by Abigail Adams to John Quincy and John Adams. And the vocabulary and eloquence in these letters that she's writing to her 12-year-old son, and to go, back then, women couldn't read. And I was like, back then, not only could women read, they could actually read better than most people now. Here we are looking down our noses at them for something they were probably better at, actually.
I think that there's one thing that I felt subtly I was a little bit disappointed in is the weakness of the character of her father too. and I can't even remember if this stayed true to the original. I don't remember his character in the movie, but it felt like Belle was always like giving him a pick-me-up speech. You know, he felt a little too helpless, I would
Yeah.
say. Even though he wants to like save his daughter and defend him, he is obviously raised like a very intelligent, like very capable woman. And so you find that he would be a strong man to do that. And he didn't quite fit that part, I felt. I felt like she was leading him more than he was leading her.
What happens when the last petal falls?
The master remains a beast forever.
And we become antiques. What did you do to it?
Nothing.
Get out of here! Go!
So what I thought was really interesting in this movie, though, is when we've learned and see, and again, not a spoiler alert, it's in the original film, but when we learn that the beast has transformed in his heart, if not externally, is when he decides he's going to let Belle go. Okay, so he's like, because what's good for you and what's best for you is to let you free, to go live your life, even if that means I'm giving up my personal happiness and my life, basically. I'm risking that my life is going to be spent in this hideous form. And I'm like, where might someone have learned that it's a virtue for a man to lay down his life for the woman he loves? Could it be Ephesians chapter 5, where Paul says, husbands, love your wives, be willing to lay your lives down for them, like as Christ loved the church. A man who loves his wife loves himself, because this is, you're now one flesh. You know, no one who hates them, so I just found it really interesting that these ideas that show that the characters are virtuous is not whether or not they can read or invent things, but whether or not they're willing to lay down their lives for their people, as Belle's willing to do for her father, or as the beast is willing to do for Belle. And I was like, these are Christian virtues.
Yeah, there's a lot of good Christian things in this movie. Again, I mean, I think, so for all the controversy that goes on around it about this one character who's poorly written, and, you know, this whole feminism thing that I still don't even really see. And if it is there again, like, I agree with it.
Right. It's such a soft manifestation of it, for sure.
You know, Christians, as they're getting so angry about, you know, this little character in a movie, there's a lot of good in this movie too.
Yeah, that's what's often frustrating when movies bring about controversies, especially within the Christian community, and you hear the word boycott tossed around a lot. You know, if in fact that the controversy doesn't end up being true, and it's actually a good story, or at least a story that you can pull out some gospel themes, you miss that opportunity to have those conversations, because you think about the beast laying down his life for Belle, and you even think about what sin does to us. It makes us ugly, you know, and that's how he was kind of cursed in that, and then he broke free from that, and you think about the ways that Christ does that for us as well. And so I think if you choose to see this movie with your kids, there's a lot of opportunity for gospel-centered conversation, and not conversations that will bring up topics that may be controversial or you're not ready to discuss yet with them. So
Yeah. It's just interesting how these classic, you know, Christian virtues that have undergirded like Western civilization for the last 2,000 years are kind of just pushed to the side. They're there, but they get lost in all the controversy about these kind of other things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unfortunate.
If she is the one who'll break the spell, you must finally learn to love.
Tell us all the time. Have you really read every one of these books?
Some of them are in Greek.
I obviously cannot condone all Christian responses to the controversy, but I also don't want to condemn them all either. I think there are reasons to be angry or frustrated that this is shoehorned into it. So I don't necessarily blame. Again, I don't condone all of the response to it. And sometimes I think a lot of the response does give it more power than it deserves or should have. But I also don't want to say that, yeah, you shouldn't have any misgivings about this at all. It shouldn't frustrate you at all. You shouldn't feel that sort of low-grade frustration that you're constantly being propagandized all the time. And now even, you know, it's in commercials, and now it's in children's movies, all that stuff. So
I would just say it is, as a Christian, you can be frustrated because I think about Netflix like rebooting all of these like original shows, and then 10 years later you're watching a new season of something and the agenda is just heavier. You feel that in a lot of things. And so I agree that, especially as a parent, I think it's fine if you choose not to expose your kids to things that maybe have an agenda that they're not ready for, and all of that. But it is in the way that we communicate to the outside world about that. That's really at the heart of it. If we're saying, we don't want to see this because being gay is gross, and that's how we're dismissing it, then we've just completely shut our voices off to a large community of people that we believe God can transform, and they need to hear the message of the gospel. And so for me, what makes me sad is not necessarily like that this agenda is being brought into the movie, because that's the world that we live in. It's not surprising, but it's in the Christians' response in the way that they're communicating about it. If you don't want to see the movie because of that, great. If you do see it, great. Like, there's freedom in Christ to either go or not go, but it's just a matter of how you're communicating that to the outside world, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching the show today. If you have any movies that you would like for us to cover, we'd love to hear your suggestions. And we'd love to hear what you thought about Beauty and the Beast, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the various controversies therein. So until next time, thanks for watching.